You probably think the word unfriend was born on Facebook. A product of our digital age, crafted in the blue and white glow of a Silicon Valley office. But what if I told you that to find the first recorded time someone was unfriended, we have to go way, way back. Before computers, before the light bulb, all the way back to 1659. The story of what unfriend originally meant is a fascinating journey that shows how our relationships, and our language, have changed forever. It's a story that proves the internet doesn't just invent new words. Sometimes, it just resurrects very, very old ones. For most of us, unfriend means one thing, that small, silent, digital breakup. One tap. One click. A connection severed. It feels clean, quick, and like the most modern action imaginable. A verb for the 21st century. But the story of that word is so much stranger, and so much older, than that. Because unfriend didn't start with a social media platform. It was already living in the English language long before the first line of code for Facebook was ever written. Its meaning has twisted and turned in a way that tells us everything about how language adapts to the world around it. It's a journey that starts not with a programmer, but with a priest. Not with a status update, but with a handwritten letter. And once you see where this single word came from, you'll start noticing a bigger, more fascinating pattern. Our most modern-sounding language is often hiding an ancient secret. The story of unfriend isn't just about a word, it's about how we've been trying to define the end of a friendship for centuries. The first unfriending to find the origin story, we have to travel back. Not to 2004, but to the 1600s. The world is a different place. There are no news feeds, only newsletters. No profiles, only portraits. And communication is slow, deliberate, and done with ink and paper. It's here, in 1659, that we find the first known use of unfriend as a verb. It appears in a public letter by a Church of England clergyman named Thomas Fuller, who was in a professional spat with another churchman. Trying to smooth things over, he wrote, "I hope, sir, that we are not mutually unfriended by this difference which hath happened betwixt us." That sounds surprisingly modern, doesn't it? He wasn't clicking a button, obviously. But he was using unfriended in a way we instantly get, the act of ceasing to be friends, of a friendship being broken. He was worried their argument had dissolved their bond. But the story gets even deeper. Because while Thomas Fuller might have given us the first recorded verb, the word itself was already ancient. If we go back even further, to the Middle English of the 13th century, we find the noun unfriend in a poem called Layamon's Brut. And back then, an unfriend wasn't someone you used to be friends with. It was much harsher. An unfriend was simply an enemy. In older forms of English, the prefix un didn't just mean reversing an action, like in undo or unpack. It often just meant not. So an unfriend was literally not a friend, in the same way we have unfair or untrue. It wasn't a process, it was a state of being. You were either a friend or an unfriend. An ally or an adversary. It was that simple, and that serious. So the word made this incredible leap, from a noun meaning enemy in the 1200s, to a verb meaning to cease being friends in 1659. That shift is the heart of the story. The social media meaning didn't come from nowhere. It inherited a piece of English that was already hundreds of years old. The lost word and its digital resurrection. So, if this word was being used in 1659, what happened to it? For centuries, it didn't exactly vanish, but it fell out of common use. It became a rare, literary word you wouldn't hear in everyday conversation, a fossil buried in old books. Even Shakespeare used a version of it, describing characters as unfriended, to mean they were friendless, alone, and without support in the world. It described a condition, not an action. Then came the internet. In the early 2000s, as online communities and early social networks began to form, a new problem emerged. You had a friends list, but what do you call the act of removing someone from it? This new digital world needed a word for a very specific, very modern social ritual. Think about the options. Delete friend sounds cold, almost cruel, like you're erasing a person. Remove from contacts is bureaucratic and sterile, like filing paperwork. But unfriend. It felt different. It felt strangely perfect. English has a powerful, intuitive pattern for verbs like this. We unplug things. We unsubscribe from emails. We unfollow accounts. The un prefix, meaning to reverse an action, is a natural tool in our linguistic toolbox. So when the need arose, unfriend was a natural fit. And here's the fascinating part. Facebook didn't invent it. Some of the earliest known online uses in its modern sense appeared on Usenet, a distributed discussion system that was a precursor to today's web forums, as early as 2003. Users were already talking about being unfriended a year before Facebook was even founded. The word was already bubbling up from the primordial soup of internet culture. But it was Facebook that took this rare, old, and newly rediscovered word and made it a global phenomenon. They didn't invent it, they standardized it. They put it on a button, and in doing so, they turned a 17th century verb into a 21st century household name. Language often works this way. A platform doesn't have to create a term from scratch. It just has to pick one that feels so natural that millions of people adopt it without a second thought. And unfriend felt natural because it had been waiting in the wings for over 300 years. What it means to click unfriend, this isn't just a story about vocabulary. It's a story about the very nature of our social lives. Before social media, ending a friendship was often a slow, ambiguous, and private affair. You'd drift apart. The phone calls would become less frequent. You'd quietly fade from each other's lives. There was rarely a single moment of severance. It was a process, not an event. The internet changed that. Online, the gradual fade can become a single, decisive action. A public or semi-public declaration with a timestamp. A single click that signals rejection, disagreement, or simply digital housekeeping. Because platforms turned the abstract concept of friendship into a quantifiable list, they also turned its removal into a symbolic act. That's why being unfriended can feel so sharp. It feels like more than just someone saying, "I don't want to see your baby pictures anymore." It can feel like a direct statement, "I am formally ending our connection." Of course, researchers who study online behavior find the reasons are often far more mundane. People unfriend because they don't know the person well anymore. Someone posts too much political content, their feed is cluttered, or they're just curating their online space. More often than not, it's less about burning a bridge and more about managing digital noise. But isn't there something poetic about that? A word that began its life in English meaning an enemy, now, in its most common use, often describes the quiet, almost administrative, maintenance of a digital life. That evolution tells you everything about us. We've turned our social circles into databases. We've turned our relationships into connections that can be toggled on or off. And when you do that, when your relationships literally have buttons, language will inevitably follow. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the weird history of our language, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and like the video. There are so many everyday words with surprisingly ancient and bizarre backstories, and once you start looking for them, you see them absolutely everywhere. The language of a platformed world, the story of Unfriend, gets even bigger, because it's not just about one word. It's a preview of how all language evolves in the age of platforms. Think about how many verbs we've gained from our digital lives. We Google a question. We DM a friend. We swipe right on a profile. We tag someone in a photo. We screenshot a conversation. Some of these began as brand names, others as interface commands, but they all made the same journey. They jumped from the screen into our everyday speech. What this means is that tech companies and software developers are no longer just building products. Whether they mean to or not, they are building our future vocabulary. And once a word becomes that common, it can outlive the technology that made it famous. That's exactly what happened with Unfriend. It didn't stay locked inside Facebook. In 2009, the new Oxford American Dictionary named it the word of the year. It entered the official lexicon. It entered journalism. It entered our daily conversations, completely detached from the website itself. This gives the word a fascinating, layered meaning. In a historical discussion, unfriend can still mean an enemy. In a personal letter from the 17th century, it meant the end of a friendship. In a social media context, it means removing someone from a list. The same word now holds 800 years of human relationships within it. It raises a huge question: what other digital words will still be with us in 100 years? Will people still talk about DMing each other long after Instagram is gone? Will scrolling still mean what it does today? We don't know. But the journey of unfriend gives us a blueprint. If a word is useful enough, and if it feels right, English will find a way to keep it. So what's the big takeaway here? It's beautifully simple. The next time you hear a word that sounds aggressively modern, pause for a second. English is a language full of old words wearing new clothes, of ancient ideas given a digital facelift. Pay attention to how technology shapes the words we use, because those changes are clues to how our society is changing, too. When a platform creates a new social action, language has to race to keep up, and sometimes it reaches back centuries to find the perfect tool for the job. The verb, unfriend, didn't appear in 1659 because of some prophetic vision of social media. It appeared because people back then, just like people today, needed a way to talk about the painful, awkward process of a friendship falling apart. Centuries later, Facebook just gave that very old, very human word a brand new, very modern stage. And that's the real story. The internet doesn't just change what we say. It reaches into the past and changes what old words can mean, breathing new life into them when they finally fit the moment. Now, I want to hear from you. What's a word you use all the time that you suspect has a much older or stranger origin than it seems? Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the secret life of a single word, please like this video, subscribe for more linguistic adventures, and I'll see you in the next one.